Eyooo YouTube friends, welcome back to my channel. This time I want to share with you my Kharazan raiding experience and also showcase the build that I've been using for Ascended Kharazan this time around. I want to take the opportunity and give a little shout out to my guild Beer. I am in a new raiding group with them and it was an absolute blast raiding with them. We went through Ascended Kharazan like it was nothing. So if you are German and you're looking for a raiding guild, I can definitely recommend you get into the guild Beer. We have raiding groups for different difficulty levels, a nice community in general. So if you're interested, feel free to ask anyone of the guild to invite you. While you see some clips of us destroying Ascended Kharazan, I want to showcase the build that I've been using there. And I am kind of proud of it because it's something truly unique and an idea that I have come up with by myself. It's a melee Righteous Flames character. Now this is a bit unorthodox because usually you wouldn't play Righteous Flames at melee, you would play it as a ranged character, as a caster. But I decided to go melee with it as there are some cool things that you can do with it. There are some nice synergies and I want to highlight those in this video. I built this character back on the League server Archimond because building meme builds like this is easier when you have free pick access to all skills and abilities and you can tinker around with them a lot. I actually didn't think that this build would be strong enough to ever be doing Ascended raiding content, but it turned out to be pretty good in Burning Crusade, so I was very happy to use it in the first 2 weeks of Ascended Kharazan. Before I go too deep into talents and the rotation stuff like that, I want to show you really quickly what Righteous Flames itself does. I want to show it here on the screen. So the TLDR is, it revolves a lot around inner fire. Basically what it does is whenever you use a fire ability, it's gonna consume 3 stacks of your inner fire in order to give you 1 stack of Righteous Flames. And at 5 stacks of Righteous Flames, your next Holy Fire is gonna slap. It's gonna do AoE damage, it's be massive damage, and it's gonna feel really good to press that Holy Fire button for sure. Now let me go through the pros and cons of the build. The pros is that it's really good single target damage and it's even better cleave damage. It's just naturally how Righteous Flames works. The Holy Fire is gonna hit multiple targets for over 20k damage, so it's always gonna be a nice time cleave fighting with this build. Another advantage is that while it's a melee build, you are definitely capable of maintaining some of your DPS even at a range. If you can't reach the boss, if there are tricky phases or you have to dodge stuff in boss fights, you're always able to just cast stuff to keep up your damage, which a conventional melee build might not be able to do. Another pro in my opinion is that it's not super gear reliant. All the clips you see in the background were from the first week of Kharazan raiding, means I am in heroic dungeon gear, so there's not much gear involved. And it still did really well. The base damage of all the abilities is just really high, which feels nice. As of the cons of the build, there's a few. One thing is, while it's definitely good single target and Ascended viable, it can't compete with the top meta builds right now. There are some variations to the build that might do a little bit more single target, but man, there are some meta builds out there that can push so much damage, you definitely won't keep up with them with this specific build. Another negative of this build is that the damage is a little bit inconsistent. You rely on crit luck quite a bit. Most of your damage comes from really big Holy Fires, so your DPS is gonna tank quite a bit when your Holy Fires don't crit. So if you don't crit with Holy Fire a few times in a row, you're gonna sit there with very little DPS and it's gonna feel very bad. Though to be honest, this kind of fixes itself with better gear and higher crit values later on in the gear progression. This time around I will not go through all the talents and the REs in detail. I will just upload the build to the Hero Architect on Thrall so you can have a look for yourself. In general, I went for a lot of crit and a lot of fire damage, as this is an ignite based build, so you want to crit as often and as hard as you possibly can. That's also the reason why I went with an Imp on this specific build and the Master Demonologist talent, which gives you additional fire damage and crit. Now there's one epic RE I want to specifically talk about, and it is Bloody Maelstrom. If you've never played with Bloody Maelstrom before, essentially what it does is, after you consumed Maelstrom weapon stacks, your next Mortal Strike or Bloodthirst are gonna do extra AoE elemental damage. And this is really nice on a Maelstrom focused build like this. It's gonna add a lot of damage to it, and it's the reason why you see me in these clips actually using Mortal Strike as a filler ability. Bloody Maelstrom adds another nice layer of cleave damage to the build. It scales with your fire damage modifiers, and overall I think it feels really nice to play. That being said though, it makes the build harder to roll because you need Mortal Strike and Single-Minded Fury. So if you don't have that, you can also just use Stone Strike and Lava Lash instead. With that, we're already at the rotation of the build. I want to show off and explain the rotation, which is pretty straightforward for this build and not very complicated once you get used to it. I also want to show off the opener that I do for this build because it is very specific and very important to get the damage rolling. And I want to do that in game, so let's hide right there. Alright, we are at the dummy in Shattered. First of all, I want to go over the opener of the build, and after that over the stable rotation of the build. Before you pull, you want to make sure that you have Inner Fire buffed up at max stacks, otherwise you're gonna prick your opener completely. You also want to make sure you have a Wind Fury totem. If you don't have it yourself, you might rely on somebody else having it. But this is really important to build up Maelstrom stacks faster, otherwise the build is gonna feel a little bit clunky. The opener is actually pretty easy. It looks as follows. You want to precast on pull time, and you want to precast any fire spell that you have. I personally use Elemental Blast, but you can also do Fireball, like Chaos Bolt, whatever, Pyroblast, whatever fire spell that you have. Except Lava Burst, because Lava Burst has a cooldown and you don't want to trigger the cooldown of Lava Burst. So we are casting a fire spell, then we're gonna hit charge at the boss. While charging, you want to press Flame Shock, and as soon as you reach the target, you want to Lava Lash. This gives you already, I think, 4 stacks of Righteous Flames, and the last stack is we get through Inner Fire. So I will show you how it looks like. You just precast a spell, you charge, you Flame Shock, and afterwards you can Lava Lash and then Inner Fire. And this brings us, you can see that in the middle of the screen, at 5 stacks of Righteous Flames, which we need for the Holy Fire to do massive damage. After building up 5 stacks of Righteous Flames, then I just start with the normal rotation, which I repeat over the whole fight. So I want to start off with hitting all my cooldowns, Arcane Power and Divine Favor in order to make my Holy Fire crit, and I start casting Holy Fire. Sadly, there's no more way to make Holy Fire instant, so you will have to cast Holy Fire no matter what. After then, Lava Burst, which should be instant through Maelstrom weapon, then Mortal Strike, Flame Shock, Fireball, Mortal Strike, and back to Inner Fire. And at this point, the rotation repeats. The Holy Fire should be back off cooldown, and you just do the same thing over again. I will show you that in action. Oh, I actually triggered something here. I will show you that in action. I do the opener that I just explained, and then I will start with the rotation. So I do the opener again, I cast, I Flame Shock, Lava Lash, Inner Fire, then I hit all my cooldowns, Holy Fire, Lava Burst, then Mortal Strike, Flame Shock, Fireball, Mortal Strike again, and back to Inner Fire. And then you can start over again with the Holy Fire, and that's just basically the rotation. I will leave the rotation either on the screen or in the description, so you can easily follow along. And with that, you should do pretty good damage. I didn't even try to do damage here, I didn't press my buttons very fast, and you can see I'm nearly at 12k TPS right now. So the build is capable of doing quite a bit of single target damage. Now, if you have a difficult boss fight with mechanics and you can't keep up this rotation the whole time, which will be the case for most boss fights, seriously, Then you want to prioritize Holy Fire whenever you have 5 stacks of Righteous Flames up. And after that you want to prioritize Lava Burst since it does the most damage out of all the other spells. And use that on cooldown. And after that just fill in with Mortal Strikes, with Flame Shock, keep the Flame Shock up, and Fireball if you have Maelstrom, but no Lava Burst ready. If you don't have Mortal Strike, no problem, you can just alternate between Stone Strike and Lava Lash instead, and it will make for the same rotation. It will be very much easier to roll this build without Mortal Strike and Single-Minded Fury. One small thing I wanna mention at the end is that you can make this build do very respectable AoE damage with just a few changes. What you need for that is Dragon's Breath. So if you happen to roll Dragon's Breath alongside all the other stuff that you need for the build, then definitely take it. And then all you gotta do is free up 5 talent points. I took them from Master Demonologist, which is not super important, and put them into Playing with Fire and Firestarter. And if you ever played any fire archetype in dungeons before, then you know where this is going. Because you now can spam Dragon's Breath alongside Flame Strike in order to do massive AoE damage. So let's test this here at 4 targets. I don't know the perfect rotation for this because I never actually played this in dungeons. I have different AoE specs honestly. But it would look kinda like this. You can still use Flame Shock to get the additional fire damage buff, Dragon's Breath and Flame Strike in tandem. Then you have this big AoE from Holy Fire, which is very nice, and it's also gonna reset the cooldown of Dragon's Breath, so you can kinda weave that in. The cool thing is also your Mortal Strike. If you play Mortal Strike with Bloody Maelstrom, will do AoE damage, so you can see me do about 17k AoE DPS with four targets here, or let's say 5 counting the other one that gets hit by Holy Fire here. Which is not too bad, like it's not super crazy, but it would definitely work in dungeons. Last but not least, I want to tell you what kind of gear I am using for this build. As I said in the clips, I am using heroic dungeon gear. Sadly, I don't have this anymore at the time I'm making this video, so I can't really show what gear I was using back then. But as a rule of thumb, I was using pure spell power caster gear. And I was doing that with agility main stat. Now the reason behind that is because the mental quickness talent is very strong. It will give you a lot of value if you have high spell power on your gear. So that's why this kind of combination is working. So if you have like generic caster gear, it would definitely work for this. And then if you get your hands on T4, you can get a hybrid agility spell power set, which is, I think, the enhancement shaman set, yes. And this will be even better for this build. With that, I'm at the end of my Melee RF build showcase. In the background you can see us killing the end boss of Kharazan on Ascended difficulty, which was quite an achievement for me because I never did that before, at least on this difficulty level. And I'm really proud that I got to do this with a build that I invented myself. If you have any questions, if I forgot anything important, let me know in the comments and I will answer. And also, as I said, check out the build on the Hero Architect on Thrall. Other than that, stay tuned for more cool builds, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on them, and until then, goodbye!